Hi, thanks for watching Bible Mountain. This video is a study of the third letter of John. Before I get into the text, I'm going to talk about why. Why is this letter in the Bible? I'm also going to talk about the biblical context, the historical context, and the geographical context, and then I'll get into the text itself and read through it verse by verse and make some commentary as we go through the letter. So let's talk about why. Why is this book in the Bible? What are we supposed to learn from this book? So let's take a look at the text, and let's scroll down to verse 5, and it reads, "Beloved, you are doing that which is faithful when you do things for the brothers, especially the ones who are strangers." This verse is the main message that the author is trying to convey in this letter. And so we see this letter, this book of 3 John, is about hospitality. It's about how to treat fellow believers, particularly fellow believers who are strangers, and particularly other believers who are going out and sharing the gospel. And we'll get into that more as we read through the letter itself. So that's an explanation of why this letter is in the Bible. Now let's talk about the biblical context. As you know, the Bible is divided into the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew and Aramaic. The New Testament was written in Greek. The Old Testament tells us about people and events from before the time of Christ. The New Testament tells us about people and events from the 1st century AD. And then the Old Testament tells us about the nation of Israel. The New Testament tells us about Jesus and the church. Now, if we look at the table of contents of the New Testament, the first 4 books are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They tell us about the life of Jesus. The next book is the book of Acts. That book tells us what the disciples of Jesus did after Jesus rose from the dead and went back to heaven. The last book of the New Testament is the book of Revelation. That tells us about things that are going to happen in the future, things that have not happened yet even as you and I live. Between the book of Acts and the book of Revelation are a lot of letters. The first group is a group of letters that were written by the Apostle Paul. These were letters that he wrote to various churches and individuals, giving them instruction on how Christians are to live. After that is another group of letters that were written by various other individuals, and again it was instruction to Christians and churches on how we as Christians are to live and conduct ourselves as followers and servants of Jesus Christ. One of those letters is the letter of 3 John. 3 John is the shortest book in the Bible, and it's the third to last book of the Bible. And this is the letter that we are studying in this video. So that's the biblical context. Now let's talk about the historical context. This is a timeline of world history. Off to the left you have 4000 BC, which is the creation, the beginning of time. Off to the right you have 2000 AD, which is roughly the time that you and I are living. The Old Testament tells us about people and events from roughly creation around 4000 BC up to about 400 BC. The New Testament tells us about people and events from the 1st century AD. Now let's take a closer look at the New Testament. This is a timeline of the 1st century AD. We have 0 AD off to the left, 100 AD off to the right. Jesus lived here on earth roughly from 0 AD up to the mid-30s AD. And the first 4 books of the New Testament tell us about the life of Jesus and the things that he did and taught. The book of Acts tells us about people and events from roughly the mid-30s AD up to about the mid-60s AD. Then we have all the letters in the New Testament. They were written anywhere from about 40 AD up to the end of the 1st century AD. And then, of course, you have the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation was written towards the end of the 1st century AD, and it tells us about events that have not happened yet, even as you and I live. So that's the historical context. Now let's talk about the geographical context. This is a map of the world. Here in the center we have Europe and Africa. Off to the left we have North and South America. Off to the right we have Asia and Australia. This area right here in the middle is known as the Middle East. The events of the Bible took place in this area in the Middle East. This is a very significant piece of land because if you think about ethnic groups, Your three basic ethnic groups are Europeans, Africans, and Asians. Those three people groups meet right here in the Middle East. And that's why the Middle East has always been a very strategic piece of land and a very important piece of land. And as I said, all the events of the Bible took place in this area. Now let's take a closer look at the Middle East itself. During the Old Testament time period, the major world empires were found in Egypt and also Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Egypt and modern-day Iraq. Between the Old Testament and New Testament, there was a shift westward. Between the Old Testament and New Testament, for a time, Greece was the dominant world power. By the time the New Testament started, Rome was the dominant world power. And so we see that there was a shift westward in the geopolitical center of the world. That shift is reflected in the New Testament. The events of the New Testament happened in the left area of this map. The New Testament starts with the life of Jesus, which took place predominantly here in Israel. But then when you get to the book of Acts, the apostles, the disciples of Jesus, started taking his message to the world. And the book of Acts tells us how they took the message up into Crete and Syria, then also to Turkey, and then to Greece, and then eventually to Rome. So again, the events of the New Testament took place in the left half of this map, which was very different than the Old Testament, as those events had taken place in the right hand of this map. The letter of 3 John was written while the apostles of Jesus and other Christians were taking the message of Jesus to the world. And as that gospel message was spreading from here out through the rest of the known world, various men wrote these letters in the New Testament to give instruction to Christians in how we should live, and 3 John was one of the letters that was written as the spread of Christianity was taking place. So that's the geographical context. Now let's get into the text itself and talk about the third letter of John. Verse 1, "The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth." So we see here in verse 1 who wrote the book. The author is identified as the elder. It doesn't tell us who the elder was, it simply calls him the elder. We don't really know for sure who wrote it. And so you want to keep that in mind as you're reading the letter and interpreting it, that ultimately we don't really know for sure who wrote it. Verse 2, "Beloved, in everything I pray for you to prosper and be healthy, just as your soul prospers." Now this verse might make some people nervous. You see here the word prosper and the word healthy. This almost sounds like the health and wealth gospel or the prosperity gospel, but it's actually not. The health and wealth philosophy or the prosperity gospel says that Christians can and should be healthy and wealthy. But this letter does not say that. What we see in this letter is that the author prayed that Gaius would prosper and be healthy, but there's nothing here to say that Gaius would indeed be healthy and prosperous. There's no guarantee that Gaius would have health and wealth in his life. And so you cannot use this verse as proof or to teach the health and wealth philosophy. Verse 3, "Indeed, I was made exceedingly happy by brothers coming and bearing witness to your faithfulness, inasmuch as you walk in truth. I do not have any greater joy than when I hear my children are walking in the truth." We see here the author expressed joy that Gaius was walking in the truth. And the author calls Gaius one of his children and talks about the joy that he experiences when his spiritual children walk in truth. And the author is specifically talking about spiritual children, but the same is true of physical children. For parents, it's very joyful when your children grow up to be good, responsible adults and to live a life that's pleasing to the Lord. Verse 5, "Beloved, you are doing that which is faithful when you do things for the brothers, especially the ones who are strangers." Now I mentioned earlier, this is the main thrust of this letter. This is the main point that the author wants to get across. He said that Gaius was doing that which is good when he does things for the brothers, especially those who are strangers. And notice the word strangers. It's not just doing something for fellow Christians who you know and who you are friends with. What's particularly emphasized and complimented here is the idea of doing good things for fellow Christians who are strangers, who are unknown to you. Verse 6. They bore witness to your love in front of the church. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. Now let's look at this phrase, worthy of God. If you had an opportunity to do something for the ruler of your country or a king or a queen, you would put a lot of thought and effort into that. And you would want to do the very best that you can. You would want it to be worthy of a king or a queen or a president. And likewise, in this verse, the author talked about treating these fellow Christians who are strangers in a manner that would be worthy of God Himself. And that concept of being worthy of God Himself is a very high standard and something very difficult to achieve. But ultimately, that should be our objective, to serve God in a manner that is worthy of God. Verse 7. Indeed, they went out for the name, taking nothing from the Gentiles. Notice this concept, they went out for the name. The name refers to Jesus Himself. And so these were men who went out for the sake of the name. They went out for the sake of Jesus. They went out for the sake of sharing the gospel, sharing the good news of Jesus. Verse 8. Therefore, we are obligated to lift up such men in order that we might become fellow workers for the truth. Let's think about this concept of being fellow workers for the truth. It's very easy for us to think that evangelists and missionaries are the ones who go out and do ministry. And indeed, they do go out and do ministry. But this verse teaches us that the people who support the evangelists and missionaries are fellow workers. And that means when we support the people who go out and do evangelism and missionary work, we are also participating in that work with them. And we are part of their ministry. We are doing evangelism and missionary work by supporting those who go out and do the work. Verse 9. I wrote something to the church, but Diotrephes, desiring to be first, does not receive us. Because of this, if I come, I will point out his deeds which he is doing, slandering us with evil words, and not content with that, he does not welcome the brothers, and he hinders those who want to and casts them out of the church. What we see here is an example of what we should not do. Diotrephes wanted to be first, and he was not helping fellow believers. He was not helping those who were strangers. And obviously the author here criticizes Diotrephes for his failure to do that. And this is an example of the kind of behavior that we should not emulate, the kind of things that we should not do. Verse 11. Beloved, do not imitate that which is evil. Instead, imitate that which is good. The one doing good is from God. The one doing evil has not seen God. This is simply a very clear statement that's probably very familiar to us and probably very logical to us. This idea we should imitate good and not evil. The trick for us is to make sure that we have a correct concept of good and evil. One of the challenges we face in 21st century America is things that are bad are being called good, and things that are good are being called bad. And unfortunately, a lot of the conventional wisdom we have within Christianity about what is right and wrong and what is good is evil is actually based more on what society tells us than it is based on what the Bible actually says. And so as Christians who want to be faithful to God, faithful to Jesus, and faithful to the Bible, we have to make sure we know what the Bible actually says, and make sure we know what the Bible has to say is good and evil, and make sure we're imitating the biblical concept of good and not our society's concept of good. Verse 12. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself, and we also bear witness, and you know that our testimony is true. I had many things to write to you, but I do not want to write to you with ink and pen. Now I hope to see you soon, and we will speak face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends by name. And that is the end of the letter of 3 John. Now remember, the main thrust of this letter had to do with hospitality. And if we back up to verse 5, let's look at that again. We see it in 3 John verse 5. Beloved, you are doing that which is faithful when you do things for the brothers, especially the ones who are strangers. That is the main message that the author of 3 John wanted to communicate to Gaius. The idea that it is good to do things for brothers, fellow Christians who are strangers, who are going out for the sake of the name, for the sake of Jesus, and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And we should help them, and as we help them, we are fellow workers with them in the quest, in the mission of sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. Thanks again for watching Bible Mountain. If you haven't already done so, please join my email list. My email list is free. In order to join, go to BibleMountain.com, click on email, and that will take you to a place where you can sign up. Your email address will not be sold nor given away. Once again, thank you for watching Bible Mountain.